to another episode of 3 Men in a War Game. I am your host, Chop, and I am joined by my two esteemed colleagues.
I'm Paul, and I still appreciate the sultry intros that Kevin provides us.
Hell yeah.
I am Potter, and Paul is always right.
Sweet.
Okay.
Noted.
There is context to that, though.
It's true.
Context we won't give anyone else, and I don't have.
The
but
context of whatever army I should be playing in Conquest.
Oh, got it.
It is fair.
Got it. And yeah, I would imagine that Paul is always right about that because he knows you. He knows what you'd like. So, real quick, let's bust this. I'm afraid this could be a long one, so I want to bust through the hobby progress thing. Just to go with hobby progress, I've been building minis for Judgement Eternal Champions, which, spoiler alert, I mean, you already have seen the name of the episodes, you know that's what we're talking about. But that's most of my hobby progress has been building, priming, magnetizing, thinking a lot about Judgment Eternal Champions. How about you, Paul?
I've been building lots of Gundam, and I've been painting lots of Conquest. And on the side,
Yes.
I've been finding time to watch the Monarch Legacy of Monsters, the TV show for all the Godzilla movies. Really fucking good.
Yeah.
Really fucking good.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, Ella and I watched it. It was neat.
I mean, it's not a perfect
How about
show
you,
by
Potter?
any means, but it's really fun.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun for sure. And like the stuff that gets done in the show is done really well. Like it has very good internal logic. You know what I mean? It makes sense upon itself.
Yes.
And it's definitely fun to watch.
Yes. Yes, exactly. All right. That's what I've been up to.
For me, I'm building a new army because Paul is always right.
Which army are you building right now? I feel like I know this.
I am building dwarves because I should have been playing
right.
dwarves from the beginning.
I mean, I could have told you that.
Yeah, I know. I tried something new. And to my credit, I stuck with it for like a year and a half.
Hey, Chops, remember the first time we talked
That's
about
fair.
Conquest and I said, hey, Potter,
So I'm going to turn my mic off and just leave now.
No,
should play some
don't.
of these dwarves. Look how awesome they are. I just
I
want
will
it on
tell
record.
you though, Potter, if you're going to get into Warcrow, you have to just remember that don't try anything but Mount Haven. That's what you want to play. So just go into Mount Haven.
So I'm speaking of that, I'm bummed because my set didn't show up today. It was supposed to.
Oh no, the box set?
My pre-order box set was supposed to show up today, and it didn't. But yes, that's the whole reason why I got into Warcrow, is because when I saw the dwarf models, I was like, done, and I pre-ordered at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, that box you got doesn't have any dwarves. Well...
No, not this set. The Beyond box will have a unit with 2 dwarves and a human commander.
Yeah, and they're still part of the hegemony, but there is going to be a strictly dwarf faction, which is Mount Haven.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's them and the religious zealot dudes that have got my interest.
What?
Yeah,
I'm shocked and surprised, sir, that's what you would like.
Shocked. Be shocked.
I like the elves because they're like the Scoia'tael Witcher style elves, where they're like ruthless and like super cunning. They're not like proper, prim, nice, very clean elves. They're like living in the woods, and if you come anywhere near their territory, they're gonna rip you limb from limb. Elves.
Yeah, and there are elves. The prim and proper elves are in the hegemony.
Yeah. Yeah,
because they're the ones that have kind of turned tail and went and lived with the humans.
Yep.
So, but yeah, no, excited about that one. But that's not what we're here to discuss.
It's not. We are here to talk about Judgment Eternal Champions by Creature Caster.
Judgment.
Which also have some really cool dwarf models.
It does. And there are some cool synergies that. Like racial synergies, at least with orcs. I play at Orc Ball in this game, which again surprises no one, probably if you know me. But let's get into it. If you're not familiar with Creature Caster is a Canadian company, and they are makers of very intricate and beautiful resin miniatures. They make large resin miniatures and standard resin miniatures. I think everything is scaled to 32 millimeter, but they make huge, like one of the ways that Creature Caster got started was by making the avatars for each of the chaos gods in Warhammer. And if you look at the lineage even of the Judgement models, you can see the scaled down versions of those. And they also have their own line of paints. They have a high pigment paint line. Like I think everyone has a high pigment paint line now, but they have their own high pigment paints called Cuttlefish paints. So if you're in the market for
that is a brilliant name, by the way.
It's really clever. It's super clever. Yeah, if you were going to name a paint company, Cuttlefish is just like right on the nose, perfect, right? Especially for high pigment paints.
Yep. The only way it could be any.
Like
go ahead.
No, I was just saying that the bottle droppers that they got look like tattoo ink bottle droppers.
Which is the same as Pro Acryl. Or
These
Pro
are
Acryl.
real nice, yeah.
Yeah, what were you going to say, though, Paul?
I was just going to say the only way that could be named better for the Cuttlefish is if they were color change.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so one thing I want to get out of the way, because I know when I watch YouTube videos and somebody is heaping praise on a thing, and the thing has anything wrong with it, like it has any stink on it, the comments just go wild for people not calling out the bad stuff. So I want to get the bad stuff out of the way first. You guys on board?
On board for bad stuff.
Yeah, so we're going to get the uncomfortable stuff out of the way so that I can heap praise on this after we talk about this. So here's the bad part. Judgment Eternal Champions started as a Kickstarter. Like, you know, many miniature games do nowadays start as Kickstarters, especially from smaller companies. It was very successful, but it happened during the pandemic, right? And so as they were doing this, the shipping landscape and manufacturing landscape changed right out from underneath them. And I think, you know, they probably haven't done everything perfectly, but I want to try and bring some of this into the thing. But here, the thing is that every backer, I think, has gotten their core box at this point. But the stretch goals and the subsequent, because basically they wanted to do every model in both injection molded plastic and in resin, and you were going to be able to get the like lower fidelity but cheaper plastic models or the higher fidelity but more expensive resin models, and you could kickstart either direction. But anybody who kickstarted for everything in plastic, all they've gotten is their core box.
Okay.
And Creature Caster's done some good stuff. They have gone, if you reach out to them, and this actually just happened for a friend of mine, reach out to them and said, hey, I have the plastic pledge for everything. And the way that Creature Caster made it right was incredible. They were like, you know what? You're right. You don't have any of your stuff. Let me just ship you everything in resin. Basically, the value of his pledge, they just converted it all to the resin models and sent him basically every resin model in the line. So he has everything now.
Wow.
He has the core box and then everything that's out in resin. So they really made it right for him.
That's good.
And they're, I think doing what they can do. And also everything if you follow them on their Discord and you follow the Kickstarter updates for Eternal Champions, you can see that they are trying to get the plastic production underway because they want the game to be successful, right? And they want it to be accessible. They want you to be able to buy a God box that has 6 miniatures in it for $35 if you want, or buy each model for $35, but get the super high detail resin.
Right.
And I think that's where they want to go. And so that's the bad thing. The bad thing is that there is unfulfilled Kickstarter baggage.
Good thing is that they're trying to take care of it.
Yeah.
they are trying to take care of it, and they're trying to take care of people. And I think the people that are willing to wait are still waiting, and there are always going to be grumps. And the thing is, I don't want to say that the people who are grumpy about it, their feelings aren't valid, because they are, right? That a lot of these people will have put out $700 to $900 for everything that they kickstarted, and all they have is the first $125 worth. I completely empathize with that as a person who dumped almost $1,000 into Monster Apocalypse.
Yeah, I would be pretty grumpy 4 years later if I hadn't gotten my stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm way with them, and I empathize with them, but I just, want to also note that they are they're not doing what Mythic is doing, right? They're actively trying to make it better. And they are trying to bring that Kickstarter vision to life. They are hosting tournaments. They're going to, all the big conventions to show their models and their game off, and running demos and taking really good care of fledgling communities like ours here in Madison. One of the owners of the company has actually been personally in touch with our local champion to get him anything he needs for prize support, get him files so that we could make t-shirts, like all kinds of cool stuff. So they're really, really doing what they can to try and make stuff right. Anyway, that's the uncomfortable stuff out of the way. And I felt like it was important to talk about that first instead of last, because I didn't want anybody waiting the whole time, gritting their teeth. And I hear you, and your feelings are valid if you have $600 still out there. But just know you can reach out to them, and they'll do what they can to make it right for you. Okay, cool. We ready to start talking about the game proper?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Oh, all right. So let's do we're going to do the standard 3-minute war game breakdown. So I'm going to start with the basics and the broad strokes of this game. So this is you ready for this, Potter? It's MOBA inspired.
What the fuck, MOBA? That's for you, Jim. That's for you, Jim.
That's my old school listeners.
I'm still not 100% sure I know what a MOBA is, but that's okay. I think I'm choosing ignorance at this point. Go ahead.
You are. All right. So, here's some things that lead to that. One of the main win cons is the destruction of your opponent's effigy. If you've played League of Legends, that's the equivalent of the Nexus in League of Legends, which is the point on either side of the map. And so if you destroy your opponent's effigy in this game, that is the core win condition. And actually all the other ways to the win condition are helping that win condition. And I'll explain that as we go. Also, to be like a MOBA, it is champion focused. So in a MOBA, it's generally 5-on-5, and this game has a 5-on-5 and 3-on-3 mode. And it even has character selection drafts, just like a MOBA does. So if you're playing 5v5 as an example, you bring 7 models, and then one of your models is vetoed, just like you would do veto in a game like League of Legends.
So are you vetoing that, or is it your opponent that's vetoing that?
You veto your opponent's models. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's actually 2 different draft selections. There's an immunity method and a veto method, which again, that's the same as a MOBA, where you'll have veto and immunity choosing. Also, just like a MOBA, your characters level up over the course of the game. Every character has 3 levels. They start on level 1, and then they can level up twice in each game, and they gain skills as they level up. Characters can buy items, just like characters can buy items in a MOBA. And also similarly to a MOBA, monsters spawn on the map, and the monsters have basically two very easy to follow AI routines depending on the kind of monster they are. And they come in various flavors of danger from tier 1 to tier 4. Where a tier 1 monster is a very angry wolf type creature. And example of a tier 4 monster is the Canuck Mara, which is a chimera made out of Canadian animals.
Okay. If there was nothing Canadian to it, I was going to be extremely disappointed.
Yeah, so the Canuck Mara has a goose head, a beaver head, and a moose head.
Yes.
Canada Gooses.
So, and it.
Oh my god.
And it's a fantastic model too. The Canuck Mara.
Where do I buy this? I just want this model.
It's on the website. You can search
I found
Canuck
it.
Mara.
I found it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's huge too. It's like a 72 millimeter model.
Oh my god, this is amazing.
Massive. Yep. Okay, so other things about the game. This is a hex-based game. The 3v3 and 5v5 maps are appropriately sized, depending, and there are a number. There's the 5v5 map. The 5v5 map is effectively a 3x3, and the 3-on-3 map is effectively a 2x2 in terms of like size, right? So 2 foot by 2 foot, that gives you about the size in hexes for the 3v3 map, and the 5v5 map is approximately a 3x3 map. So again, we talked about the way that you pick your people. You do the blind pick, the veto, immunity. I think when I wrote this document, there were 40 champions. I think there are 42 now. So we have quite the selection of champions. So remember I said so if you're playing 3-on-3, you bring 5 models. If you're playing 5-on-5, you bring 7 models. And then when you show up to an event, like if you were going to a tournament, you would know ahead of time whether or not the tournament was veto or immunity, because that would obviously influence your list building depending on which type of event that it was. Yeah. So any questions so far, guys? Paul, I know you said you were going to be loading me with questions.
Well, I mean, you're covering everything. That's the problem. I guess what I want to know is, at this point, how do you like the hex-based movement?
Oh, okay. So I am, as you know, I did a little stint there, and I still have a lot of love for Warhammer Underworlds and intend to continue playing Warhammer Underworlds because I think it's a very slick and fun rule system. And I think for me, hexagons are the best of guys. So the thing that I really like about hexes is that they reduce ambiguity. Mm-hmm. And by reducing ambiguity, I mean they basically eliminate ambiguity, at least in terms of measurement, right? And the cool thing about this game that a game like Warhammer Underworlds does not have is this game has terrain that mimics non-hex-based miniature terrain with the same kinds of the same kinds of keywords like obscuring and difficult and hazardous that you would expect out of a standard minis game. And since the maps are much larger and contain a much larger selection of hexes, there are tons of hexes on these maps. I wish I had counted, but there are a lot of hexes on the maps.
So are you custom building the hex maps, or is it already on there? Like, I guess what I'm envisioning is BattleTech.
I'll get into that actually. Because there's actually something that I think you're really going to appreciate, especially when I tell you that there are effectively, and we'll talk about this in a little bit here, there are effectively 3 paths to victory. But like Guild Ball, the victory condition is always one thing. Like in Guild Ball, right, the victory condition is 12 points, but there are 2 different ways to get there. Right. And here, the victory condition is effigy destruction, and there are 3 different ways to get there. So the scenario, as you will, is always the same, and the area of the map is always the same. Like if you roll out a 3x3 map, when it's blank, it's always the same hexes, and it's always that same shape and size. But the terrain, there are pre-configured maps, and you can build your own maps with the terrain templates. Gotcha. Which remind me, if you need an analog, it's a lot like the terrain templates from A Song of Ice and Fire.
Gotcha.
Right? Like you have a piece of terrain, and this piece of terrain is smoke, or this piece of terrain is woods.
Okay.
and they'll take up different numbers of hexes depending on what they are.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Yep. All right. So let's go into the core concepts. If you guys are ready to move on, don't have any more questions.
Nope, ready to go.
No, yep,
Neat.
I'm good.
Neat. Okay, so one of the first decisions you make in the game is what god you are playing. There are 6 gods. Each god sort of conveys a different play style. The play style is kind of your list plus your god. And what your god gives you is a warband bonus, which is something that your warband can have. They also give you an item that you can only purchase if you are with that god. So the god that I typically play is Krognar. Krognar's specific item is called an Umbrasphere, and you can only get an Umbrasphere if your god is Krognar. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. You also have an effigy power, which is your ultimate. It's your once per game. You get to use this effect one time each game, and they are huge effects. All 6 gods have very strong asymmetric effigy powers. And then the other thing you get is what's called an avatar bonus. And so each god has a living avatar, or an undead avatar, I guess, in the case of Tomas. But every god has an avatar, and their avatar gets a specific bonus if they're played in faction, because you can play your models out of faction. So also all of the models can play for 2 different gods, except for the avatars. Or wait, hold on. They're aligned to 2 different gods.
Okay.
And this, we'll get into like what that means. But the avatars are only aligned to the single god. And so as an example, the avatar of Krognar is Zeron. Or the one I just said, Tomas, that's Fazil, is the avatar of Tomas. And when you are playing Zeron in Krognar, Zeron gets a bonus that he only gets when he's playing in Krognar.
Okay, gotcha.
Which encourages list building, right? It encourages specific sort of list building decisions.
Right.
Or strengthens you if you make specific decisions. So that's your god and your effigy. When you're playing a 3v3 game, your effigy has 16 health. And when you're playing 5v5, your effigy has 20 health. That will be important. I just want you to know that going right now, because we talked about effigy destruction being the core win con. And it's important to note that the 2 different game sizes also have a different end level, because three models on each side is much different than 5 models on each side. So 16 versus 20 health. Okay. Now we're going to talk about your heroes cards, because heroes are the core of this game. As I noted, it's a hero centric game. And I'll note just to start that heroes come in many different classes, but I'll also say for your sake that the classes are very strictly there. So they're not, so hard to describe this, because, when you say something I'll say the classes more define the role of the hero than they do anything mechanically. Does that make sense? Sure. So when I tell you that the classes are bruiser, assassin, shooter, sniper, tank, controller, enhancer, and soulist, those don't convey mechanical. None of those are tied to a specific mechanic, but every model that's an assassin does assassin-y shit. Right. Does that make sense?
No, that kind of reminds me of Flesh and Blood, right? Where
well, there you do have like very unique mechanical things, because a warrior in Flesh and Blood can only play warrior cards, right?
Right, but it always felt to me like the ones that were more specific for each character were fairly different and not necessarily anywhere near what the other ones were.
Yeah, and the cool thing is, like, when you look at the class, it gives you a really good idea of like what that model's role is, and this is also very MOBA-ish, because you might have in MOBAs there's a lot of different sort of like character types like junglers and laners, right? And carries, and like everything means a specific thing. And so the more you sort of dive into this game, because this game is cavernously deep, and the more you get into it, the more you realize that the assassins play specific roles that bruisers don't, and that the tanks do specific things. And the way you build your list, like, you don't necessarily need, and you obviously can't take one of everything, but your list competition, your composition, you want to pay attention to what you're bringing so that you can get the goal across that you're trying to do with your team. So you do have these classes, and I want to make sure I note that. But now I want to go over the actual mechanics of your card. So the first thing to note is on the front of your front of your character cards, and the character cards actually come in a lot of different flavors. There's like a way to do it with standard cards. There's a way to do it with tarot cards. And then I think the way that the Madison meta has done it is there is a sheet that goes around online that you can download where it's the front and back of the tarot cards next to each other. And then you print and cut those out. So if you want an idea for like Guild Ball, right? So you can see the front and back of the card at the same time. Similar
we
thing.
used to do that with Warcaster, our Warcasters in War Machine. We would do their card there and then their spell card behind it. It's it's a very easy way to look at your cards. And
so here, I'm going to read what would be considered the front of the card, because the front of the card has your stats. And so I want to go over the basic stats for the game and what they mean. So the first stat is move. I bet you guys can't tell me what move does.
Roll around on the ground.
Yeah, it's how many hexes that your character can move on a standard move action, and it's generally 2 or 3. That's those are the pretty standard values. So you're moving 2 or 3 hexes on a single AP. So your next stat is agi, or agility. And so agi is how many dice you remove from your opponent's pool when they roll against you. So if they're rolling offensively against you, one of the first things they do is they gather their full pool, and then they immediately subtract your agility from their dice pool.
Makes sense. I like that.
Yep. The next stat is resistance. Resistance is a digit. It's typically 0, 1, or 2. And this is the amount of damage negated from every attack, every basic attack put onto the model. And so you're generally either, again, resistance 0, which would negate no damage. Res 1 negates 1. Res 2 negates 2 damage on a basic attack. Make sense?
Yeah, I like this concept of like a straight number of reduction.
It's great. It
makes life easier.
It's so easy to grok. It does. Mm-hmm. And I wait till I tell you about the rest of it, because everything is sort of done so that the mental load is all in the tactics and not in the understanding how the game works. But the game it takes a while to get, because there's, you know what I mean? It's just like when you play Malifaux the first time, you're like, wow, that was a lot. And you play it a second time, you're like, I still don't know that I have everything together, mm-hmm. right? And the more you play, the more you sort of understand how everything fits together. Anyway, so the next thing is our 3 offensive stats. And so they're melee, magic, and ranged. And these are the dice pool that you roll for those kinds of attacks. So melee is your melee attacks, magic is your magic attacks, range is your ranged attacks. It's pretty simple. And when you look at a character's sheet, their attacks all have a symbol. It's an axe for a melee, an arrow for a range, and like a swirly fireball for magic. So you know what pool you're rolling from just by looking at the symbol next to your attack. And just because I've been saying this, your average here is 5, 6, 7, or 8. Those are and it's really 5 through 7 is your average stats for these specific things. 7 being good, 6 being average, 5 being below average.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. And then the next thing we have is our health. And so your characters, when they level up, they gain additional health points. And so characters will have their level 1 health, level 2 health, level 3 health. When you level up, you immediately gain that health benefit. and it's relative to where you are now. So I'm just going to go with Rakir because I'm looking at Rakir. Rakir is 15, 16, or 18 health, depending on his level. And as an example, if I was at 8 health when I leveled up to level 3, I would go to 10 health because 16 to 18 is 2, right?
Yep.
So you always gain the amount of health relative to what the level should be. When
all right, so
up.
I just want to make
that's pretty simple.
I just want to make sure I understand. So it's not just your max that's going up; it's you're still gaining that benefit even if you're not at max.
You always gain it when you gain the level. You gain the health from. So
it's not like you're.
And then it is also.
It's not like you're in a dungeon in Final Fantasy and your HP goes up and it doesn't help you because your current HP is still 5.
Yeah, exactly right. No, yeah. Your HP goes up. Yeah, your HP goes up when you level up. But you also have an effective maximum health that changes,
sure.
Right? Okay, so the last stat is Soul Harvest. And Soul Harvest is we're gonna immediately now talk about the second victory condition here. So the first victory condition is hitting your opponent's effigy. And since we've talked about agility and resistance, I will tell you now that your opponent's effigy has 3 agility and 1 resistance. So whenever you attack your opponent's effigy, you're pulling 3 dice out of the pool, and you are also reducing your damage by 1 when you attack the effigy. The second way to destroy your opponent's effigy is we talked about monsters that spawn on the map, but we haven't talked about souls, because one of the features of every map is a number of soul pits. And the number of soul pits depends on the map. It's typically 1, 2, or 3 soul pits per map. And a soul spawns on a soul pit every round of the game except for the first. So how you collect a soul is if you're a standard model, when you are adjacent to a soul, you can roll 2d6 and then add your soul harvest stat to your 2d6 roll. And if you equal 12, you get the soul onto your character.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you gain the soul, you immediately level up and you do 4 points of temporary damage to your opponent's effigy.
Temporary.
Follow me so far?
Wait. Okay, I think I'm following you.
Yeah, you're going to have to follow me all the way to the end for this to coalesce. Yeah, I promise, baby birds.
I'm just intrigued by the temporary. I'm just intrigued by temporary.
Yep. So here's why it's temporary, because the soul goes on to your character. Mm-hmm. So also, you're outside of very strange circumstances, your character can never lose levels. That's not to say they can't ever lose levels, but by the normal game means, there's no way to lose a level. Okay. But if your character is killed while they are holding a soul, your opponent's effigy regains the health from the 4 that you took from the soul.
Okay.
So when you soul harvest, you do that 4 temporary damage. And so that damage is effectively on the base. And if you do the remaining damage to kill the effigy, it dies. But if your character, while they're holding a soul, dies,
the soul goes back to the effigy.
Correct.
Cool. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Okay. And again, it's a 2d6 roll, and you have to equal 12. And so soul harvesting goes from 1 to 6. That's the range. So most assassins, as an example, have 2 soul harvest. You might imagine soulists have 6 soul harvest, and that is their role in the game, is to be good at soul harvesting, because they're on better than even odds on 2d6 to get a soul every time they roll the dice. Yeah. So, and then there's a lot of models that have 4. And there's some that demons typically have 3. But yeah, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 is usually what you're looking at. But undead models typically have a soul harvest of 1, and undead models have a bunch of extra, like, we're not going to get into all the minutia of the rules because we'd be here all night. I just want to sort of give the main breakdown and help you understand the game, right? So after that, we have our basic attacks, and I'll try and speed this up a little bit. So our basic attacks, they have 4 qualities to each. Well, they have 5 qualities to each attack. All right, so you have a cost to make the attack. I know it's a lot. It's so fun to talk about it because I'm like, how do I explain this game when you're not actually looking at the pieces and I'm not demoing it for you? Each character, this is a alternating activations game. I probably should have pulled that right off the rip. So you activate a model, I activate a model, etc. Right? When you activate a model, every model in the game has 3 AP at the default. Cool so far?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how a movement of 1 AP, just to give you an idea of what an AP is worth, right? So attacks are typically 1 or 2 AP, and the attack tells you how many AP. That's the first quality of the attack. The second quality of the attack is the reach. That's how many hexes away you can reach with the attack. Okay. Melee attacks are typically 1 unless you're a house, in which case you might have a 2 reach on your melee attacks. And there are some house-ass characters that can do that. And then range is anywhere between 3 and 6, typically, for magic and ranged attacks, depending on the model and what they can do. The next 3 qualities are going to require me to start talking about the dice. So we're going to get into the dice here. And the dice, I think, are the sauce.
Are they custom dice?
They are. Okay. They are. But I can't talk about these damage profiles without explaining the dice. So we're gonna have to get into the dice now. It's funny because I wrote this like very, very cool for the listeners, this very awesome breakdown, and I didn't actually consider talking through it. I should have probably practiced it anyway, because the dice is actually like 3 bullet points down from here. Doesn't matter. We're talking about it right now, guys.
Make it happen.
Make it happen. All right. So the next 3 qualities on all your attacks are glance, solid, and crit. And so these are 3 properties of an attack. And each one of them is representative of the amount of damage that they will do. So a glance is typically your least damaging profile, and a crit is your strongest. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like Malifaux.
Okay. Yeah, it's exactly like that, actually. It's like, that's a really good way to think about like the weak, standard, strong damage in Malifaux. Yep. Okay, so how this works is the custom dice in this game are D6s. And there are 4 possible symbols on the D6. It's a miss, that's a blank side. There's also a maneuver, which is on one side of the dice. There is a hit. So it's 2 hits, 2 misses, 1 maneuver, and 1 judgment is the other side of the dice.
Judgment.
Yeah, all right. And so a judgment is used as a hit and a maneuver. And we can say it as and you don't have to use your maneuver, so it's used as a hit, or it's used as a hit and a maneuver to be like 100% accurate to what it is. Okay, so here's how this works. I'm just gonna go through the properties of an attack in combat. So what we do is we first determine our attack pool. So we take whatever the type of attack is, we take the number. So let's just use a melee attack as an example, and we'll use Rakir as an example. So if Rakir is making an attack in melee, at standard, he has a 7 melee. So he's going to grab 7 dice. And let's say he's attacking Skull. Skull has an agility of 3. He will subtract 3 dice. With no other modifiers, I could now roll the dice with Rakir. So I'd be rolling 4 dice. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, what I want to tell you, without getting into all of the minutia, is there is a shitload of ways that this dice pool changes. And they're all easy to track, but there's a fuck ton of them. So like if you charge, as an example, that's +2 to your attack dice for the charge attack. There's also crowding out and ganging up.
That sounds familiar.
Just like Guild Ball.
Just like Guild Ball.
Yep. Just like Guild Ball. It's the same. Yep. And War Machine too, right? Similar, or maybe not. Maybe just Guild Ball. But
Guild Ball.
Just Guild Ball. Yep. So when you it works the same way as Guild Ball. Like it's just like a straight plus dice minus dice depending on what you have, right? So if I'm attacking and I have 2 people in support, that's +2 dice. If one enemy is adjacent to me, that's -1. Right? Simple. So once you've determined your attack pool, you roll your dice. So here's the hot sauce. No matter how many dice you roll, you can only pick 3 results. So even if after your full calculation you roll 7 dice, you only get to pick 3 of the results for your attack. But this is actually a good thing, because the more dice you roll, the smoother your math is, right? So a single hit value and your 3 is a glance. 2 hits is a solid. 3 hits is a critical blow.
Gotcha.
Pretty easy to drop, sense. Right?
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering how you're going to get here. Okay.
But now what I'm going to tell you is that there are innate abilities, and there are not innate abilities. There are active abilities and combat abilities, and these abilities, these combat maneuvers, they trigger off specific dice, just like triggers in Malifaux. So if you're playing as Rakir has a thing called Viper Strike, which reads, target enemy damaged by a dagger suffers poison. But to do that, you need 2 maneuvers in your attack. So
it just has to be in the pool itself, or does it have to be one of the ones you pull?
In the ones you pull, out of the 3 that you pick to apply. You have to have 2 maneuvers in it to apply the Viper Strike maneuver. And so the optimal thing is you roll 3 judgments, because your judgments can be used as hits and maneuvers. So if you have 3 judgments, you get a crit and Viper Strike, and you're living in magical Christmas land. But typically you're having to make decisions about what dice you're applying based on the combat maneuvers, because you can also use maneuvers to push your opponents and move away. And you can do stuff like push opponents into the monsters that are on the board, and then the monsters will immediately follow up attack your opponent.
You know what some of this feels like, Chops? Some of this feels like...
what's that?
Oh my god, why can't I think of the name of the freaking Gladiator game?
It's a little bit Guild Ball, a little bit Arena Rex, a little... Yeah, there's a lot of games in this game.
Yeah, I was like, it feels like it's a minutia of things that like people
and
like.
there's a little bit of Malifaux too, right? Like the game takes inspiration from a lot of places, but it makes something that is wholly unique to itself. And the character cards actually remind me mostly of Malifaux, because they're just like riddled with abilities. Like, I'm just going to give you an example here of Rakir. So Rakir has, his dagger, as an example, is a glance of 2, a solid of 3, a crit of 5. And now I'll tell you your average health values are like your level 1 health is usually 15 to 22. So 22 for your big tanky dudes, and 15 for your beaters. And there are some that go lower, like some soulists actually go lower than that. But on the average, it's between 15 and 22. Or really 15 and 20, I think, is your average. And then the specialists go outside of those ranges. Sure. But he also has Cloak of Darkness, which says +1 agility versus range attacks. But he has his ability to Viper Strike. He also has Shadow Step, Shadow Rift, Toxic. When he levels up to level 2, he gets an ability called Escape. When he levels up to level 3, he gets an ability called Shadow Meld. And every character is like this.
Damn.
And Rakir actually has a low amount of text on his card as compared to some of the other models, which have like 2 full card sizes of text, just like a Malifaux card might, right? Like a Malifaux card might be a full tarot front and back of text, rules text. So very similar here when you're looking at the rules cards for characters in the game. All right, now I've been talking a lot. Do you guys have any questions so far?
No, I mean, I think I've been asking mine along the way, and you've answered a lot of the ones I've had too.
But you're following me, right? Like for how the character card, how you read the character card. All right.
Yeah, no, I'm on board.
Let's talk about some other stuff. Using Rakir as an example is going to be really good for me. So Rakir has an ability called Shadow Rift, which says place a shadow orb in an unoccupied adjacent hex, and he can do this for 0 AP. Now, it's important for you to know that he also has a 1 AP ability called Shadow Step, which says when adjacent to a friendly shadow orb or friendly effigy, Rakir can be placed adjacent to any other friendly shadow orb or effigy. And shadow stepping from a shadow orb destroys it. This basically means Rakir can teleport from shadow orb to shadow orb. And also, I should note to you that Krognar's effigy power is called Shadow Dance, and that lets all the champions of Krognar go to different shadow orbs around the map or back to the effigy. So here's something I'll tell you. At level 2, Rakir gets an ability called Escape. Escape is a combat maneuver that can be used for 1 maneuver. And it says place a shadow orb in an adjacent hex. So this is when he does combat, right? So if he does a combat roll and he has a maneuver, he can spend the maneuver on the dice that he's chosen to place a shadow orb, and then Rakir may shadow step for 0 AP. And this doesn't affect his limitation of 1 shadow step per turn, because shadow step on itself is a once per turn ability. So, now you're sort of seeing like the synergy and like why you want to level up, because now he can like hit someone and then bamf out of danger.
Yeah, I was about to say stab, peace, motherfucker, I'm out.
And I bet you can tell me what kind of class Rakir is.
I think he's a rogue.
Yeah, he's an assassin. Yeah, and it's Orc Rogue is literally what it says on the top of his card. Yep. All right, and so his level 3 ability is called Shadow Meld, which allows him to gain stealth, which is a really cool ability in the game. Anyway, so and every character has abilities that they gain at level 2 and 3. Some gain more than 1 ability when they go to level 1 or when they go to level 2 or 3, right? So there's just all sorts of customization as you go up. And there are some characters even that have they have an ability as they level up where they have to choose a tree. So Skull, as an example, can go into either Mystic or Warrior. And if you go into Mystic, you get 1 level 2 and level 3 ability. But if you go into Warrior, you get different level 2 and level 3 abilities. Again, this is just for me to tell you like how varied all of the different champions are in this game. And how they have all their own very unique play styles.
Okay, I got a quick question.
All right.
Somewhat while you're talking about different like unique champions. How do you know who does what? Like if I read the cards. Okay, that's the only way to know, really.
I mean, so like I said, if you look and you see the class will give you an idea of what role they're filling in a list.
Okay.
And the god will also tell you a little bit, because everything that plays to you're going to see most of the heroes in the game, if they're not an avatar, they're aligned to 2 different gods, and they do things that are adjacent to that god's sort of flavor.
Okay.
So every model that's in Krognar is going to be adjacent to another god. And I'll just, as an example, I'm looking at 3 different heroes, Styx, Skull, and Rakir, who are all Krognar aligned, but they're all also separately aligned to a different god.
Right.
One of them to Tomas, one of them to Torin, and one of them to Brulin. And Each of them has a very Krognar thing, but also they have things that sort of that make them fit into the other gods. And as you know what the gods' sort of play styles are, that kind of gives you a hint at what they do. The class kind of gives you a hint, and then reading their abilities. But that's just like Malifaux, right? Like you're not going to know what a Malifaux model does until you actually like read its card and sit and think about it. And really, with this game, I have actually found it hard to evaluate heroes without actually putting the models on the board, because the game there's sort of like so much tactical depth in this game that it really helps to actually see the abilities in practice and play with the models to get an appreciation for what they do.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way that I'm viewing this, just for my simple mind, is that the effigies pretty much are your masters in Malifaux, and then like the crew that you're building around it are going to be the heroes that have those synergies with it.
Well, kind of, right?
And I'm thinking of this very simplistic because I'm a very Hulk smash kind of person, so I like it in simplistic terms.
Yeah, the god gives you gives you your sort of divine gifts, right? Mm-hmm. They give you what your divine gifts are, and they sort of like lead you down wanting to pick certain models. And the reason for this is every person that you pick gets your warband bonus. Like every character you gets your warband bonus. But if you pick a hero who's not aligned to your god, they don't get to use your effigy power. Only models that are god aligned get to use the effigy power when you call it.
Right. Gotcha.
But any model can be like, I could play Krognar and I could bring any model I wanted. I could say I'm playing Krognar and I'm bringing these 5 models, and none of them are Krognar. But the thing is, none of them will get to Shadow Dance if I do that.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about everybody gets 2 AP, right, on your turn, unless you resurrect. And this is to get to the next mechanic. So we should now talk about the phases of the game before we talk about that, because we need to talk about the communion phase. So every round of this game,
you have to eat a little wafer of unleavened bread.
No, thankfully not. Every round of Judgment is the communion phase, the activation phase, the end of round phase. And so the activation phase is just us going back and forth, activating all our models, right? So communion phase there's effects that happen at the start of communion, and you'll have that on your character card, right? It'll say at the start of communion, do this. Then you'll have moving unbound souls. So souls that are on the board but haven't been bound to a character will move. Then you'll move monsters. Then you'll generate fate. We haven't talked about fate yet. There's actually a resource to manage in the game, and that's called fate. And we'll talk about that very shortly. Then you spawn a soul and spawn monsters where applicable. Then you resurrect dead models, and the resurrected models come back with -5 from their maximum. Not that they have 5 less maximum health, but you subtract 5, and that's how much health they resurrect with. So whatever their maximum health is, they resurrect at -5.
Okay.
And then you get -1 action point for that round. The round you resurrect, you only get 2 action points. And then you have the end of communion, and you can call your effigy power. And then you go into the activation phase, and you do communion every round, right? And so every round you're doing the fate generation, you're spawning souls, you're spawning monsters, you're resurrecting dead heroes. So sort of this is to get at the fact that there's really no alpha striking in this game, right? Because every round, if your model dies, you get that model's coming back at the start of the next round, even if they're coming back somewhat diminished.
Gotcha.
And there's even one god where their warband bonus is they don't take -5 health when they come back. They come back at full health.
Oh.
And that's nice. the paladin-y god, Ista.
Oh, paladin, huh?
Yep, yes, sir. The effigy actually. So each of these effigies actually has their own model, and the Ista effigy has like angel wings on it.
Oh, I love it.
And a sword. Yep. Okay. So we talked about that. Now I want to talk about generic actions. So the generic actions in this game are advance. So that's your thing to move. And now we're going to talk about bank, because we talked about how you can have a soul on a character, right? So if you are adjacent to your effigy, you can spend 1 AP to bank a soul on your character. And when you do that, you're essentially transferring that soul to your effigy. You don't gain any health to your effigy, but that temporary damage on your opponent's base is now permanent. There's no way for them to regain that health.
Okay.
So you can bank souls. You can charge. So charging is a move plus an attack, but it takes 2 AP. But as we talked about, you also get a 2 dice bonus when you charge, and you also get to move +2. So you move +2, and you get +2 dice. You can recall, which is you spend 2 AP to recall back to your effigy from anywhere on the map. And then you have to be placed adjacent to your effigy. But this can do a thing which is called provoking an attack of opportunity. I bet you can guess why that is a thing, and we'll talk about that too. You can, if you're adjacent to your effigy, you can buy items. You can also spend an AP and a fate to heal 5 health. You can soul harvest. And those are like your basic actions. Make sense?
Okay.
Cool. All right. Effigy, I did mention effigy recall is 2 AP, right?
I think so, yes.
All right, cool. And we talked about combat. We talked about how you determine your dice pool. And again, there's lots of different ways to modify that dice pool. And there's a whole list of modifiers. So charging, ganging up, distracted, cover, firing into melee, aiming bonuses, right? There's a whole bunch. Now, let's talk about what I just mentioned, which is disengaging. So, or what provokes a attack of opportunity. So the two things that provoke an attack of opportunity, and it's really just engaging, but you can engage in one of two different ways. One is by recalling back to your effigy, and the other one is by performing an advance that would take you out of your opponent's, out of engagement with your opponent, right? And that produces an attack of opportunity, and that is your opponent getting a free attack on you when you walk away, with the caveat that if they roll 3 judgment, it knocks you down on the spot. So a little risky for attacks of opportunity. All right, questions now.
No.
I want to make sure I give you... Cool.
No, I'm following along.
All right. Now, Paul, I'm going to bring you back around to the beginning.
All right.
Which is we're going to talk about the terrain and the map.
Okay, perfect.
So we talked about that there's the 3x3 and the 5x5 map. But what I want to talk about now is that there are many types of terrain that go on the map. There are soul wells. Now, during every game round, during the communion phase, we talked about how a soul is generated. So 1 soul is generated per communion phase. Now, if there's 1 soul pit on the map, the soul is always going to pop up at that soul pit, right?
Okay.
If there are 2 soul pits on the map, they are going to alternate back and forth. So it'll be this one, and then that one, and then this one, and then that one.
Okay.
If there are 3 soul pits, they go around in a circle. So it'll be soul pit 1, soul pit 2, soul pit 3, soul pit 1, soul pit 2, soul pit 3.
Gotcha.
And that's how they'll spawn. And you determine that with dice rolls as you're going.
Okay.
like you determine the start of the order with a dice roll, right? Okay. So, and that's also how you determine what monsters show up at monster pits. Is at the beginning of the game, each monster pit gets a dice roll on it, and each monster pit will be clarified. And now what we're going to talk about is the maps. So your core rule book, I think the core rule book comes with 3v3 maps and 5v5 maps. Hang on, let me look. Oh, it's 3 and 3. So you get 3v3 maps and 5v5 maps. And each of the maps has completely different terrain layouts. Different numbers of soul pits, different qualities of monster pits, different terrain in different places. And then there's also a map generation guide. Like there's like a best practices for making your own.
Oh,
maps,
that's
so
handy dandy.
Custom maps. Yep. And there is also, and this is the way that we play now in Madison, there are tournament seasons. And every tournament season, much like Gaining Grounds in Malifaux, Creature Caster creates a selection of maps for that competitive season. And like right now, I think there are 4 3v3 maps, there might be 5, and there are 8 5v5 maps.
Okay.
And as you're going into a tournament, you'll know what the selection of maps at the tournament is. Like it'll be like you're going to be playing on maps 2, 3, and 6 or whatever, right? And so you'll know which maps, and that way you can again create your list, much like you would in Infinity, right? You create your list and sort of like think about what you want to bring based on the maps you know you're going to play on. And these maps are available in the app. So you can always look at the maps in the app ahead of time and you know what they're going to be.
Okay. I like that. I like that because I don't know, I don't know, it's just a cool way of doing that of you know, since you have, you know, like Guild Ball where it's almost like a set scenario, but to be able to change up the maps, which is something you couldn't do in Guild Ball.
In Guild Ball.
That makes it that solves one of those problems of variance in the game.
It definitely does. And also the thing that's really cool is the competitive seasons and the different maps sort of favor different gods different ways. Because just like as an example, Gruul is the god power, the warband power is that they treat hard terrain as normal.
Right.
So they can just like walk through it. It's called Pathfinder. They can just walk through without having to spend extra AP to walk. So maps that are very flooded with difficult terrain, they just kind of shrug it off, where other war bands, it can be extremely punishing. Right. And I just think that's really cool, right? That the different maps can sort of like give you different inherent bonuses based on what's on them. And then just to give you some ideas of what terrain can do. So you can have passable terrain, and that's just like a terrain feature that is there. And an example of this would be a monster pit. A monster pit is passable. You can walk over it. You can do whatever you want, but it's there and it's defined as a monster pit because monsters spawn out of it. Right. There's also blocking terrain, which would block line of sight, as you might imagine. There's rough ground, which basically affects -1 move penalties for moving into it. There's treacherous ground, which is a -2 penalty and also 1 point of armor piercing damage as you walk into it. There's impassable terrain, right? And so like, again, this is just like all of the different sorts of ways that terrain can be defined. And then certain terrain also conveys cover or not, right? And so cover is just like a -1 dice penalty when you're in cover. Right. And the line of sight rules are actually really hard for me to explain without a graphic. So if you want to understand the line of sight rules for this game, the rule book is free and you can go look at the diagrams. It's super simple though to understand how line of sight and cover work. You just need the graphics to do it.
Right.
Okay. All right. That manages all that. So now it's just talking about fate and then a few other things that I want to talk about. So, fate. I mentioned you generate fate, right? And so in round 1 and round 2, every warband generates fate. Cool, right? You generate 1 fate in round 1 and 2 for free. All right. There are also, every map has at least 1, and just like Soul Pits, there's at least 1, and also Monster Pits. There's at least 1, but as many as 3 shrines. And so if you're standing next to a shrine, depending on the number of shrines, you either generate 1 shrine for 1 fate for controlling a shrine, or up to D3 fate for controlling the shrine during communion.
Okay.
And so controlling a shrine is being the only character, having your warband be the only warband that has any adjacent models to it. I'm trying to think of a better way to put that, but like uncontested, right? Contested would be if I have 1 and you have 1. If you have uncontested control of a shrine, you control it and you generate an amount of fate dependent on the number of shrines,
right?
Per round. I made that sound way more confusing than it needs to be. So let's just say if it's 1 or 2 shrines, generally you're getting D3 fate per round. So it
doesn't matter if you have control of the other shrines, you're still going to get that same number.
As long as you control one of them. And if there's 2 shrines and you control them both, you roll for both of them. You get fate for both of them. Nice. Your opponent has really fucked up though if you control 2 shrines. Because the maps are usually they're not completely symmetrical, but they're usually somewhat symmetrical. So if there are multiple shrines, they are like equidistant from each other and usually 1 on each side of the map. Right. Okay. And if there are 3 shrines, they don't ever generate D3. They only generate 1. Unless you control 1 on your opponent's side of the board. Anyway, again, the game is a little intricate. But so the other way is per soul that you control, you gain 1 fate. So if I'm controlling 2 souls, that's an additional 2 fate per communion phase. Makes sense? Mm-hmm. All right. Now I have one thing other that I have to talk about outside of what we do when we spend fate, and because we've talked about 2 axes of the victory condition, right? But I promised you 3, and this I've been sort of like saving this for the big reveal. So the first one is direct damage to your opponent's effigy. The second one is harvesting unbound souls from the map. The third one is killing your opponent's models. So when you kill an opponent's model, you get their soul.
Okay.
So when you kill an opponent's model, the things you get is you instantly gain a level, and then you instantly take their soul onto your character.
So you Shao Kahn. Got it.
Yes. Now, if they were holding a soul, you don't also get that one. That one evaporates back to your effigy, but you get their soul. Right. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. And so that's your 3 victory conditions: combat, soul harvesting, destroying the opponent's effigy. And that can be hard to do because you have to get all the way to the other side of the map. Okay. So we talked about all that. Now we have to talk about fate. So things you can do with fate. You can stand your ground. So as you're being charged, you can spend 1 fate to take 1 dice out of the opponent's attack pool during the charge. So instead of +2, they get +1. You can, and we talked about self-healing, that's 1 AP and 1 fate to gain 5 health up to your maximum. You can spend 1 fate to cleanse. That removes 1 condition from your activated hero. You can spend 1 fate to re-roll an entire dice pool. Those are your universal ways to spend fate.
Okay.
But there are also abilities that require fate to do. All right? So I'm going to read you one off Rakir now because I want you to understand like how vital fate is to the game and how like stand your ground, while it can be useful, isn't the best use of fate. Okay. So we talked about Viper Strike on Rakir, right? That's you spend 2 maneuvers and target enemy damaged by a dagger attack suffers poison. Okay, so Rakir also has an ability called Toxin. And so what Toxin says is adjacent enemy that is suffering poison takes 2d6 true damage.
Wow. That's a lot.
So you can it's a merc. Let me tell you, you can really take people with that. And people respect Rakir because it's hard to apply the Viper Strike because it can be difficult to get 2 maneuvers and do damage. Like it's a tall order. It's not impossible. And on charges on average dice, it's like 50-50 to Viper Strike. Mm-hmm. But that Toxin boy, if you're looking across the board and you see a Rakir on the other side of the board and your opponent is holding up Fate, you are always worried about that Toxin because you know that Rakir is doing anywhere from 2 to 14 damage, just out of nowhere to you. So that's, and all of the abilities that use Fate are insane like that. So here's another one. Skull has an ability called Soul Burn. Soul Burn requires 1 AP and 1 Fate, and its enemies within 2 hexes take D6 true damage per soul bound to them. Roll separately for each enemy with a soul bound to them.
Nice.
Yes. So you can really house people with that, right? If they're carrying a big lot of souls on them, Skull can just punish them for doing it. Here's another one. Styx has an ability called Astral Split. 1 AP and 1 Fate. Styx switches places with target enemy within 3 hexes.
Wow.
Just whoop, you get to change position. And so if you've played enough Guild Ball, you can imagine how bad a position you can put your opponent into with an ability like that.
Yep.
So Fate is incredibly, incredibly powerful, and you have to manage Fate because you're getting somewhere between 1 and 5 per round. I would say you can gain more than that, and you can also gain 0. But generally, you're getting somewhere between 1 and 5 every round, and so it's a very important resource to manage. And I know, Paul, resource management is high.
I love resource management. War game
good. Yeah, and so managing your Fate is, I think most games of Judgment are won and lost in how well Fate is spent.
Right.
When and how you use your Fate is critical to winning games of Judgment. Like a good Judgment player, positioning and understanding your synergies and all that's very important, but how and when you spend your Fate is vital.
Right.
To understanding how even spending Fate on a reroll. Man, sometimes you're hell yeah, I'm re-rolling those dice. But there's been a lot of times when I've been looking at 3 Fate on my side of the board and I rolled 3 blanks and I'm just nah, I'm not re-rolling it because I need those Fate for something later. Right. So where sometimes the re-roll is obvious. I've rolled 10 dice and rolled 2 successes. I've been absolutely fucking not. Re-roll. Yep. Okay. So I promised at the beginning of this it had a chance to go pretty long, and it's already gone long. So I don't want to speed through anything, but I also want to.
Do we want to do it? Do you want to do it part 2 then? Kev?
No, because we can get through this. So I want to note there are conditions in the game, right? And you have a set of standard conditions like knockdown, which we talked about. Which the knockdown condition is brutal. It reduces your agility to 1. Yeah, so if you're knocked down, if you really want to get standing back up, because it is bad news to be knocked down. But there are plenty of other ones too, like burn. That's a pretty common condition. Burn is at the end of you can't heal while you're burned. And then at the end of your activation, you suffer 3 true damage. And so that can be a pretty brutal condition. And there's quite a few of them. But also there are innate abilities. And you'll note on your characters, this is a thing you'll see on your characters, and they'll have things like dash, leech, armor piercing, ward, nimble. And these all do things that you would, if you think about what your core abilities do in any war game, they're going to do their version of that in this game.
Right.
And just to give you an idea too, just to go back to conditions, and then I'll go to those innate abilities. So other conditions are like pin, poison, freeze, curse. Curse is crazy because if you're cursed, you can't have souls bound to you. You don't lose souls that are bound to you, but you can't gain any more while you're cursed. You also can't contest or control shrines. It's brutal. Poison basically is -1 to all your stats. So -1 to your offensive and defensive stats and -1 to your soul harvest. So being poisoned also sucks just terribly. And these are, again, all conditions. And in cleansing conditions is actually I will say that's a pretty common use of fate is cleansing, because a lot of times, and this is also why there's a strategy in this game called condition stacking, because your opponent's generally not going to want to clear more than one. And actually you can't. You can only use one active ability. You can use an active ability once per activation, so you can only cleanse once. So if you're stunned and knocked down, you just have to pick the one that's worse and clear that one. Yep.
That's brutal.
Yep. And then we talked about innate abilities. So you have things like backstab. This model deals +1 damage while using a basic attack with a melee weapon when the enemy is engaged with another friendly model. Makes sense. Nimble. This model can't be targeted by parting blows. That means they can just walk around if they'd like to. Yep. Dash. This model gains +1 move for 1 advance action once per activation. So your first move, or whichever move you choose, you get +1 movement. And there's 3 pages of these, right? So there's a ton of them.
Louise.
Yeah, I mean, but it's just like any game, right? You're going to have your, well, here's one of my favorite. One of my favorite rules is mounted. So when a mounted model resolves a charge, it gets +1 dice to its attack pool after all other modifiers. And it inflicts 1 extra damage from its basic attacks when it charges. So mounted models get +3 dice, and they do +1 damage on their attacks when they charge. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But so you have, just to give you an idea, you have all of those things that stack up. Now I want to talk about monsters, because we haven't talked about the monsters yet. And so whenever one of your models becomes engaged with a monster for any reason, it attacks you.
Makes sense.
And I want to talk about these monsters for a second. So these monsters, very, very frequently, the monsters are on much better stats than the heroes. So the average agility of monsters is 4, rather than the average agility being 3. And the average melee of monsters is 8. Instead of the average being 6 or 6 or 7, the average is 8. So most monsters are rolling 4 or 5 dice against you when they swing on you.
Right.
And also their damage profiles are wicked. So I talked to you about Rakir, who's an assassin, right? He's an assassin, and his damage profile is 2, 3, 5. The weakest tier 1 monsters, attack is 3, 5, 6.
Gotcha.
So they get heinous. Like Terra's attack profile, his damage profile is 3, 5, 7.
Okay, that's gross.
So you don't want to be taking attacks from that. But no. Also monsters activate during the communion phase. So we talked about step 2 of the communion phase is move unbound souls and then move monsters. Monsters will prioritize the enemy with the most the most health that's in their range, and then that's the model that they move toward. And if they end in their engagement, they attack. And then if they have a ranged attack, they will also resolve their ranged attack. And so we talked about Terra with that terrifying damage profile. Mm-hmm. That model has a reach 4 attack. So it moves D2, so basically it has a threat range of 6. So when Terra's on the board, and Terra is a tier 4 monster, the scariest tier of monsters. but you got to be really careful because it's gonna throw rocks at you. It's called Rock Hurl, and that's a 3/5/7 damage profile. But then the monsters all have their own sort of flavor and characteristics too. Like there's a tier 2 monster called Vujasha. And Vujasha has an ability called Soul Seeker, which says Vujasha immediately activates as per the hunter rule whenever a soul becomes bound to an enemy. So and that's any way. If I do a soul harvest, if I kill your model and I get the soul, whenever that soul gets active, whenever a soul is placed on a model, on a player controlled model, Vujasha activates and moves toward that model.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and they all have their own sort of flavor like that. Like Canuck Mara, when it activates and attacks you, each of its heads attacks you. Ooh. So you get hit by the goose, then the beaver, then the moose.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. It's super rough. But also killing monsters. So we haven't talked about this yet. Killing monsters, you gain a level. For killing a monster. You don't get a soul, but you do gain a level for killing a monster. So it is very worth seeking out and killing monsters because that's one of the primary ways to gain levels. Right. You gain levels by killing enemy models or by killing monsters. And every monster also has a bounty. And the bounty is usually, it's either 1 or 2 fate. And some monsters even have items in their bounties. So Canuck Mara, as an example, when you kill the Canuck Mara, you have a choice of 2 different items that you can take. And there's a tier 3 demon monster that has there's just badass sword that you get to take if you kill it. And usually it's called Dorgokin. And if Dorgokin spawns on the map, it's a fucking race to get to it because both players really want to kill you. You want the cursed sword. Hell yeah. Yep. Also, Paul, you'd be happy to know there are summoners in this game as well.
Oh, I'm on board.
The Avatar of Krognar, which we talked about, Zeron, can summon skeletons.
Okay.
And then to make summoning the skeletons even cooler, at level 2, Zeron gets an ability called Bone Shards, and that's when his skeletons die, they explode and do damage to adjacent enemies.
I like it.
That sounds like a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, so Zeron can basically make mobile missiles. Zeron is a crowd control model is what he does. He's a soulist. He has a 6 soul harvest. And he can also harvest souls from 2 hexes away from a soul pit. And he also can summon these amazing skeletons. And there's a demon summoner called Victor. It's basically a warlock. It's a gnome warlock.
Hey, Paul. You know what? He might be in a shopping cart right now.
Yeah, Victor's awesome.
You know I can't turn down a gnome warlock.
All right, so let's... I know. I was actually waiting the whole time to talk about that. I had the summons at the end so I could talk to you about Victor as the gnome warlock.
I was poking around. I saw him demons. And I thought 2 things. I thought gnome summoner, gnome warlock thing, perfect for me. And also I know how much Potter hates gnomes. So
hate him.
It is perfection.
All right. Yeah. So he gets to summon demons. Okay, so let's talk about the buy-in for this game because I feel like once you've had the full pitch for this game, it's almost irresistible, right? It hits on so many cylinders. It has just an enormous amount of depth. The rule book just to note here, from front to back is 98 pages. Now, it's not a super dense 98 pages. Like there is some generous white space, and also a big font and it's like a 1.5, I would say, line spacing, but it's still 100-page rule book, right? It's a big rule book.
Right.
So it's a complex war game. I would put it somewhere between Malifaux and Bushido in terms of complexity. Okay. Or somewhere between Malifaux and Infinity, right? It's like it's it may be as complicated as Malifaux. That's probably the best barometer. Is like, if you think about the complexity level of Malifaux, it's pretty similar for Judgment.
Okay.
And I think probably if we did a strict word count on the two rule books, it would be very similar in terms of word count in the rule book.
That's not terrible.
All right. Now let's talk about how cheap this game is to play as a war gamer. All right. So the core box is $125. All right. So $125.
Before you go past that, how essential is the core box?
It is a must purchase. There's no way around it. I would say that's how essential it is. There's zero way around buying the core box for this game. That's it. And whether or not you think that's a plus or a minus, who's to say?
Sure.
I don't know.
It goes either way.
But it's unavoidable. So let's talk about, because what I wrote, and Paul, if you're looking at the sheet, I said it's one of the best values in minis that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
For what you get for this $125. So what do you get for $125? You get 10 champions. All 10 champions are either aligned to Krognar or Ista. And then they're all also aligned to other gods. But the core box's theme is Krognar versus Ista. Okay. So 5 of the models are aligned to Krognar, 5 of them are aligned to Ista, and then they are also, as I noted, every hero is aligned to 2 gods, right? So they're also going to be aligned to other gods. All right, so you get those models. You also get 2 monsters. You get Inferno, which is like a flaming skeleton of death. Mm-hmm. And Gloom, which is the goodest boy, is the hellhound. Okay. As you will. So you get those 2 monsters. You also get 3 hard plastic skeletons, which are for Zuran. So all in total, you get 15 minis. The 10 heroes, 3 skeletons, 2 monsters.
So Kevin,
but go ahead.
You pointed out that specifically that the skeletons are hard plastic. What about the other heroes?
They're all hard plastic. I'm just saying, the summons are also plastic. Is basically what I wanted to iterate, is that your summon, it's not like tokens for your summons. They are minis.
Understood.
So you get 3, and they're like 3 fiery skeletons. They all have like flames around them. Which most people paint blue because, they're like warlock. They're dark wizardy skeletons. All right. You also get 2 hard plastic effigies, and the effigies, you guys, are massive. I don't know how to you almost have to look up the scale of how the effigies, because the effigy, so each effigy takes 3 hexes. That's how big an effigy is it's 3 hexes. And the effigies are approximately 70 millimeters tall.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen
the
right. Picture.
Is that right?
What is the scale of the models in general?
It's 32
mil. Okay.
It's 32 mil, and every model is on the same size base. So all the models are on the same size base. I think it's between 40 and 50 millimeters. I don't actually know how big the bases are, but every model's on the exact same size base. I think they're about 72 millimeters tall. If I'm thinking about they're huge. They might even be 100 millimeters tall. Yeah.
I've seen the pictures you guys have put in Discord, and they're quite beefy.
They're beefy. And so you get the Krognar hard plastic effigy and the Ista hard plastic effigy in the box. And then you also get cardboard representations of all 6 effigies in the box. Okay. Also in this core box, you get the rule book, the 100-page rule book, and also a 24-ish page learn to play guide. So this is like the Fantasy Flight method, right? You can actually pretty much set up and play your first demo game just out of that first book. I think you actually entirely can. And then you're only going to reference the main rule book when a question comes up. I will note, though, that the rule book is not indexed. So that's like... I know. I have to throw it out there.
It's 2024, people. Come on.
I know. But what I usually do is, or what I've done now is, I like my rule book has a ton of little like Post-it flags in it, and then the PDF is indexed, so you can really easily search in the PDF. Okay, so you get that. You also, I want to save the best part of this for last, but so you get a bunch of hard plastic status tokens. Like there's a whole bunch of plastic bits and bobs inside the box, and you also get cardboard terrain, a full set of cardboard terrain. So all the terrain you need to make all 6 maps, even the 5v5 maps, like all of them, it's all included in the box. So you get enough terrain to make all of that. You also get all of the tokens that you need also in cardboard. So all the souls, fate, status conditions, everything you need for the 10 heroes that are included, or the 10 champions included, all of those cardboard tokens are included. Okay. Also, you get the unit cards, although I don't like the unit cards that are in the core box. Like I said, I like the printed tarot-sized cards, so I would just, if you were going to get into the game, just burn the cards that are in the box and print the tarot-sized ones. You get dice, so you get 2 sets of dice. You get a white set of dice and a black set of dice, and then you also get 6 d6s. So 18 dice. And I should note that the custom dice are big and chunky, and they're made out of this like incredibly clacky material. They're very satisfying to roll. Nice. And then what I think is the coup de grace of this box is that you get a 2x2 neoprene 3 versus 3 map.
Yeah, I saw that. Wow. That looks like the that's almost worth the price of the starter box as it is.
This is what I'm saying, right? Like you get, it's effectively everything you need. And the thing is if you look at the competitive meta, you can be almost perfectly competitive with the core box. Like you can make a really good 7 model roster with the 10 models that are in the box.
Right.
And I think that's incredible. It's not like they gave you like, so every champion in this game is balanced in a way that they're pretty good. There are, I think, sort of like tier 1 heroes and tier 4 heroes, but most of the heroes are in that like medium range, right? They're all roughly on par with each other, and it's how you use them that matters. And you get really good models in the box. Like Rakir, who is a premier model, in my opinion, is one of the models that's in the box. Anyway, there's just a ton of really good models in here. So very, very, very much worth the price of admission for the box. Zaron's in the box too. Anyway, really good value. There's a giant Minotaur.
If you're looking at it, if the resin models are something like $35-$40, the plastic models are probably $15-$20. So just the 5 models alone are already paying for the 10 models alone are already paying for the box.
Yeah. You get really good models. Saiyan, Donragar, Brock. These are all the models that are in the Kogan. The models that are. Oh, one of the models in the box is a Minotaur with a Gears of War gun. It's like a shotgun chainsaw.
I love it.
Yeah, and it has a really cool ability, Potter, called Sustained Attack. And so I'll read you Sustained Attack. Sustained Attack is a combat maneuver that requires a Judgment. So as long as you have a Judgment dice, it says enemy damaged by chainsaw attack takes 1 extra true damage on a d6 roll of 4+, and repeat this process until you don't roll a 4+. So you're just like sitting there chainsawing on them, or until you do it 3 times. So you can do up to 3 additional true damage. It's badass, man. I love that fucking ability. Kogan's really cool. All right. So $125 gets you basically, effectively, perfectly into the game. And then from there, it's really up to you. We have a couple, I would say, Pokemon masters in our meta. if you catch my drift. But also mostly it's players like me. And what I mean by that is players who focus on one or two gods. And so I'm actually really focused on one god, Krognar, but I also, because Krognar has so much overlap with Brulin or Bruellen, I also have a pretty good Bruellen stable of minis. I'll say I have purchased an additional 9 miniatures for the game at this point. And that's basically my total spend is the box plus the 9 minis. And I don't foresee myself buying other minis unless they're good out of faction or they're Krognar or Bruellen, right? So I'm looking at the minis as they come out now because Creature Caster releases 1 champion per month. That's basically the pace they've been on for the last 18 months. It's just every month there's a new resin miniature that you can buy. And I'm just paying attention to what the gods are now. And if they're god aligned or if I feel like they're a good, strong, out of faction pick for me, I buy the miniature. Otherwise I leave it alone. And that's basically what it costs to play this game. And I am hooked, if that wasn't obvious.
Nope, not at all.
Like I feel like this is I've been searching for that Goldilocks minis game for a really long time, and I feel like
That's
this one,
huh?
Really, it just fire. Yeah, it fires on all cylinders for me. The way that I feel, like the way that you guys talk about Conquest, that's kind of the way I feel about this game. Like I don't know that I need another miniatures game as long as this game is being produced and I have people to play it with. Right. It's just that good.
Sticking point right now is that all the models that I like are for a god that's not in the starter box. I was hoping you were going to say no, the starter box is not essential.
Oh yeah, no, the starter box is you need all the tokens, right? You need the tokens. It gives you the tokens, the dice, the 3v3 map. Yeah. Now, if one of you was to buy the box and you were always going to play each other, then it's maybe not as necessary to buy the core box, but it's roughly essential.
Because look,
right?
I'm gonna say right off the bat, anybody that has a heavy machine gun that shoots skulls, I'm on board with.
So you've seen Ashel, yeah. Yeah.
So if that tells you anything about my allegiance to Tomas, I am a Tomas fan.
Yep. All right. Yeah. Did you see Tomas's avatar?
Yes, I did. That was what started me down the road.
A character. Yeah, it's a character called Fazil.
Yeah. Any type of undead skeleton riding a skeleton-y type horse. Yeah, I'm on board with
horse. Yeah, and he is by far. So Fazil is what we would call a glass cannon, and you can do things. You can outfit him with equipment that makes him a little less glass, but I want to emphasize the cannon part of glass cannon because he has an ability called decapitation, which is I have been on the unfortunate side of too many single activation kills from Fazil. There aren't very many models that can take another model from full health to dead, and Fazil can. Yeah, Fazil is a monster.
I like him
because it's not outside of the realm of possibility. Like on the turn, if you're playing Tomas and you call Tomas's effigy power, it's not outside of the realm of possibility for you to charge into a 4 agi model and still roll 9 dice. It's just.
I mean, now I will say some of the Tomas stuff is a bit more Geiger than I like, but I you throw Victor in there.
But remember what I said. You can, remember what I said about being able to take stuff out of faction. And a lot of Tomas players take out of faction models.
But I don't hate them. I definitely don't hate them. So, that's my boy or girl or them. I don't know which it is, but.
Fazil is it. I know the lore, and Fazil isn't him, but also dead. So I don't know if it matters.
It, them, they. I don't know,
because Fazil is undead, and undead carries its whole own. Like, there's actually a whole rules page for undead and for demons because they have their own sort of special rules. Like, all the demons, when they die, they drop a coalesce marker, and they can resurrect at coalesce markers instead of adjacent to the effigies. And also, demons typically have, instead of a strict level up ability, they have 4 abilities in their level up stack, and they get to pick one of the 4 each time they level up. And you just choose the one you want. Demons are super cool.
Interesting.
And that goes to like Ashel. Ashel is a demon. And there's a bunch of demons.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of them. I'm interested.
But did you see Ankura? Ankura is another model I was going to suggest you look at.
That one is pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah, she is very gross, and her Doom Bell is appropriately heinous in game. But yeah, this is we're way over the line at this point. So I want to say that I really like this game. I think that it is criminally underplayed right now. And also, don't let my perceived explanation of the complexity of the game deter you from it, because the game is actually incredibly smooth to play. Very smooth to play the game. Playing the game is actually very simple. It's just that there is so much tactical depth that most of the game is in your head trying to figure out exactly what the fuck you're going to do against the bad things your opponent is about to do to you. And it's a very, very, very good game. Hard to understate that.
Right.
So my final thoughts for Judgment Eternal Champions is that if you've never heard of this game or you haven't yet thought about diving in, you should download the rules because they're free. And also the rule book is full of evocative and amazing art. And then I would challenge you to go and tell me there aren't 5 models out of the 40 some odd that appeal to you. Because like Malifaux, they're really there's an aesthetic for everybody as long as you like. I would say like badass stuff, because everything is kind of badass.
Everything that I looked at was definitely badass.
Yes.
All I have to say is Barnascus, and I'm done.
Dude, yeah, wheelchair-bound, flame-throwing dwarf. Get the fuck out of here. Barnascus is amazing. You also have like a Landir for your elf-loving types. He's a sharp-shooting elf with this badass. There's just so many cool characters. You can run all Minotaurs if you want to.
Minotaurs, I like it.
Dude,
it's just so good. There's also a demon for every flavor of Warhammer. Yep. So if there's a specific school of Warhammer demon you like the look of, especially if you like Khorne, because like Drelgoth, very Khorne. Ashel, very Khorne. Kane, very Khorne. So you can really get in there. And then, there are plenty of the other Chaos Gods represented as well.
Ankura, that's not a play bear at all.
Yeah, very Nurgle. Masuzi is a little Zinchi, a little Nurgly. But yeah, Nias, very Slaneshi. So there's plenty of that flavor there too, if you like that Warhammer sort of dark kind of look. Anyway, game is great. Final thought, check it out. How about you guys?
My final thought is that at the very least, There will be a Victor purchased, and anytime that I play Chris, he will be my mascot cheering me on.
Oh, God damn it.
Hell yeah.
But, you know, if I'm going to do that, then, I mean, I might as well get free shipping and buy a starter, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Chris, final thoughts.
Yeah, they had me at all the dwarves.
There are a lot of dwarves.
Oh yeah, as long as
there are a lot of dwarves, and so guess what? There's like 4 or 5 of them, including Barnascus in Ista.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, Ista is the where most of the dwarves go. Just like, but so there's a lot of orcs. There's a lot, and most of the time, if you look, the like racial typing is more tied to a god than not. Like, most of the Minotaurs are tied to either Gruul or Bruellen. Most of the orcs are tied to either Bruellen or Krognar. Most of the dwarfs, I think, are Tauren or Ista. So, like, you have that kind of thing. But yeah, I like everybody here in Madison calls my list the Orc Ball, because I'm usually presenting my opponent with 5 orcs, and I'm like, ban the orc you would like to see the least. Because I like all the orcs. Cruel is my homeboy. There's actually a phrase that has been going on that my boy Oliver started, and that's ABK, always ban Cruel.
Is Cruel the one with, like, he's got like a pole arm with a rib cage attached to it?
Yeah, he's got a skeleton hanging from the pole arm from his staff. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. He's one of the A-tier models. He's very good model.
There was one of the guys in your meta was painting him up and did a really, really good job on the paint job on it too. That he posted up in our Discord.
Yeah, there's a couple Cruels painted locally. Cruel is very good. There's just Anyway, so much good stuff. Definitely check out the models. Bye. Oh wait, no. Thank you to our patrons. You guys are awesome. Static is the City. For the music, sweet. Hit us up on the socials now. Bye. Sorry. Whoops.